Amanda, I hope the $1,500 I give you monthly has made your life easier. The owner of that low, resonant voice was my grandfather, Arthur Vance, who sat at the far end of the long, polished mahogany table. It was Thanksgiving Day, and the pale autumn light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows seemed to gild everything in a false, honeyed warmth. Dust motes danced in the golden rays, oblivious to the tension coiling beneath the surface of every forced smile. My grandfather, a titan of industry who usually found family gatherings to be an inconvenient distraction from board meetings and overseas acquisitions, had unexpectedly decided to join us this year. His presence transformed what should have been a humble family meal into a high-stakes theatrical performance. Because of that, my father, Jonathan Brooks, my mother, Karen Brooks, and my younger sister, Madison, were desperately acting as if they were welcoming royalty. There was the highest quality turkey, its skin crisped to a perfect golden brown and glistening with herb-infused butter, mashed potatoes lavishly filled with black truffles and imported French cream, roasted Brussels sprouts with pancetta, and a vintage Bordeaux from the exact year my grandfather was born, a detail my mother had bragged about for weeks to anyone who would listen. The living room was filled with the savory scent of roasted meats and the forced, too loud, cheerful laughter of my family. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting prismatic lights across walls that had recently been painted at great expense. Being able to see my grandfather again after such a long time was, in truth, a genuine joy for me. I had missed his blunt honesty, the way he never minced words, the way his presence alone could silence a room. He was the only adult in my childhood who had ever looked at me and seen a person, not a problem. To tell the truth, ever since I left home at 19, I had never attended Thanksgiving at my family home. Not once. The memories of that house were not fond ones, they were sharp-edged things that drew blood whenever I got too close. I originally had no intention of coming that day either. I had planned to spend Thanksgiving alone in my small apartment, perhaps with a frozen dinner and a movie. But I could not refuse my grandfather's earnest invitation when he called and said, "I'll come this year. So, Amanda, you come with me." His voice had left no room for argument. There was something in his tone, a note of concern, perhaps, or a premonition, that made me agree. And so, after 5 years of determined absence, I crossed the threshold of my childhood home once more. However, that perfectly staged atmosphere and my family's insincere behavior made me feel unbearably uncomfortable. It was as if I had walked onto a film set where everyone knew their lines except me. My father laughed too loudly at my grandfather's jokes, his guffaws echoing off the marble floors. My mother refilled my grandfather's wine glass before it was even half empty, her movements quick and anxious. As they desperately tried to keep my grandfather in a good mood, the occasional glances they shot at me carried an unspoken pressure, a silent, venomous warning. Don't say anything unnecessary. Don't ruin this. Don't you dare. I sat at my corner of the table, shrinking into myself, pushing my food around my plate. The turkey tasted like ash in my mouth. The expensive wine felt like vinegar. Every bite was a reminder of the gulf between their performance and my reality. Eventually, the main course was cleared away. The remnants of gravy and cranberry sauce were replaced by pumpkin pie, its sweet spice aroma of cinnamon and nutmeg mingling with the bitter, acrid scent of freshly brewed dark roast coffee. As dessert was served, the family's tension loosened slightly. My father unbuttoned the top button of his dress shirt, his face flushed from wine. My mother let out a small, rehearsed sigh of relief. A relaxed, almost jovial atmosphere began to spread across the table. Even Madison stopped checking her phone. Then my grandfather quietly placed his coffee cup back onto its delicate porcelain saucer. The soft clink silenced the room as effectively as a gunshot. He suddenly fixed his gaze directly on me, not with the businessman's cold assessment, but with something softer, something almost tender. In his eyes was a pure sense of concern for his granddaughter whom he hadn't seen in a long time. The lines around his eyes deepened as he studied my face. "Amanda," he said, his voice gentler now, stripped of its usual authority. "Haven't you lost a little weight? How are you feeling? You shouldn't push yourself too hard." You look tired." The unexpected kindness made the iron tension in my heart loosen just a little. For a moment, I forgot where I was. I forgot the performance, the lies, the silent warnings. I gave him the best smile I could manage and answered as brightly as possible, though my voice cracked slightly. "Thank you, Grandpa. I'm doing well. Really. And if you'd like, you could come visit my place sometime. It's small, but it's mine. I have a little balcony where I grow herbs." My grandfather narrowed his eyes with genuine delight and nodded slowly, a rare smile crossing his weathered face. I would love to see where you live. I would love to see your herbs." He paused, then continued in a conversational tone, as if we were the only two people in the room. "Have you gotten used to living alone? Becoming independent is no easy task. I remember my first apartment. The pipes froze every winter, and the landlord was a crook. But I learned more there than I ever did in any boardroom." We shared a small, genuine laugh. For just a moment, the tension broke. But then, as if remembering something important, my grandfather added more words. His tone remained light, casual, but his eyes sharpened. "Well, as long as you have a solid financial foundation, I suppose you can live with some peace of mind. With my monthly support, you don't have to worry about rent. Your life should be much easier, correct? You can focus on your health and your work." The sound of cutlery stopped. Every gaze in the room pierced into me, sitting small in my corner of the table. My fork, laden with a piece of pie, hovered halfway to my mouth. Time seemed to freeze. I couldn't keep up with the sudden question. My brain scrambled to make sense of his words. "Monthly support? What monthly support?" I barely managed to squeeze out my voice. It came out as a whisper, then grew louder. "What are you talking about, Grandpa?" My question echoed emptily through the tense silence, bouncing off the imported marble floors, the new granite countertops, the freshly painted walls, all paid for with money I had never seen. If it's about that money, you don't need to worry," my father quickly cut in, interrupting any further words I might have spoken. His tone was swift, too bright. He didn't even bother wiping the sweat now visibly forming on his forehead and upper lip as he forced a fixed, plastic smile toward my grandfather. "Amanda can be a little naive about the world, you know? She's always been that way. Dreamy. Impractical. Since she's not good at managing money, we simply took responsibility and handled it for her. It was a burden, but we did it out of love." Those words were like oil poured onto an open flame. My grandfather's expression, which had been warm and open a moment ago, grew harsh and cold. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Manage it, you say?" His voice was low, tightly suppressing a rising anger that rumbled beneath every syllable like distant thunder. "Then answer me, Jonathan. If Amanda is supposed to be the one benefiting from this financial arrangement, why does she look as though she knows nothing about it? She looks confused, surprised, not grateful. She looks like she's hearing about this for the first time." He leaned forward, his knuckles whitening on the tablecloth. "Can you show me proof, right here, right now, at this table, that my money is truly being used for this child just as you claim? Bank statements, receipts, anything." My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish stranded on a dock, gasping for air that wouldn't come. No words came out. His face cycled through a dozen emotions in rapid succession: panic, fear, desperation, and finally a hollow, sick realization. In that vacuum of silence, my mother suddenly cut in. Her voice trembled perfectly, pitched to play the tragic heroine in a melodrama of her own making. Tears welled in her eyes, or seemed to. "Dad, how can you say something so cruel? On Thanksgiving? You know how much we worry about Amanda. She's always been a difficult child, so sensitive, so dramatic, and we've been doing everything in our power to protect her from herself. You have no idea what we've sacrificed." But my grandfather was no longer fooled by her theatrics. He had spent 50 years negotiating with liars and manipulators. He could spot a performance from a mile away. He cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand, the gesture almost violent. "Be quiet, Karen. Not another word from you. It was you who begged me for financial help in the first place." The air in the living room grew even colder. Ice seemed to form on the windows. My mother's mouth snapped shut. He continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was more frightening than any shout. The quiet menace in his tone commanded absolute attention. Was it 5 winters ago? I remember it as if it were yesterday. It was a Tuesday night. Rain was pounding against my windows. Your voice was trembling on the phone. You told me this, word for word. Dad, Amanda left home without listening to our advice. She's sick, and we're worried she won't be able to live alone. We can't sleep at night thinking about her out there all by herself. Please, we need help. He paused, letting the weight of his own words hang in the air like a guillotine blade. I believed those words, he said. I believed in your concern for your daughter. I believed you were acting as loving parents should, setting aside your pride to ask for help. I thought it was admirable. And so I started sending the money. Every month. Like clockwork. $1,500. Never missed a single payment. He turned his gaze back to me, his eyes softening for just a moment. And now look. All I hear from this child is, what are you talking about? She has no idea. His voice rose, filling the room. Explain to me what is going on. Right now. I will not ask again. Exposed by the truth, my mother's face turned deathly pale, a waxy, sickly pallor that no amount of expensive foundation could hide. She looked around the table as if begging for rescue from anyone, anywhere. When her eyes met Madison's, my younger sister, who had been silently picking at her acrylic nails, bored by the drama, suddenly slammed her hand on the table, rattling the china. Grandpa, stop it already. Madison shouted, her shrill, entitled voice cutting through the tension like a rusty knife. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the marble. She glared directly at me, her eyes full of venom. You have no idea how much Mom and Dad have struggled. Amanda, you're always like this. Always talking about your own pain and suffering and your stupid illness, and never once thinking about how much everyone else has supported you. You're so selfish. She pointed a manicured finger at me, her nail polished a garish red. Even if you got the money, you'd just blow it all on medications or whatever nonsense you waste your paycheck on. That's why Mom and Dad have been managing it for you. What's wrong with that? They were helping you. They were protecting you from your own bad decisions. Those words became the final trigger. In that moment, I understood the full scope of the betrayal. It wasn't just my parents. Madison knew. She had always known. She knew exactly what our parents had been doing. She had benefited from it, the new clothes, the trips to Hawaii, the car she drove to her private college. And she had helped deceive me all this time. She was not an innocent bystander. She was an accomplice. I hadn't even realized a sound had escaped my lips. It was a small, broken noise, half laugh, half sob, half something else entirely. A sound of absolute, devastating realization. That's a lie, I whispered. My voice was barely audible, but in the silence of that room, it carried like a scream. Everyone turned to look at me. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Liar. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. Shaking, I stared straight at every one of them. My father, my mother, my sister. I looked them in the eyes, one by one. I never said I wanted to leave this house. I never ran away. I never chose to be homeless. It was you both, Mom, Dad, who told me to get out. You stood at that front door and you said, if you're so sick, go be sick somewhere else. We're done with you. You abandoned me because my illness was too much of a burden on your perfect little life. In response to my anguished cry, my mother pretended to collapse into theatrical tears. She clutched her chest as if she were having a heart attack. She shrieked back at me, her voice piercing and fake. What a terrible, horrible thing to say, Amanda. How dare you? We would never tell you to leave. Your illness is making your memories confused. You're not well. You've never been well. You need help. My father echoed her words, glaring at me as though I had lost my mind, as though I were the villain in this story. That's right. We refuse to indulge your delusions any longer. You're sick, Amanda. You've always been sick. Sit down and be quiet before you embarrass yourself further. Their blatant denial burned away even the faintest trace of affection that had remained in my heart. I felt something inside me snap, a final thread, and then freeze over completely. The last ember of hope for their love died in that moment. Suppressing my trembling, I answered in a voice as cold as the winter night they had thrown me into. The words came out flat, hard, and final. My memories are confused? No. I remember it perfectly. Every second. The day I was thrown out of this house. Left alone in the cold night with nowhere to go. Do you remember what the temperature was that night? 14 degrees. 14. I had no coat. No phone charger. No wallet. Just the clothes on my back and a half-empty bottle of pills. I turned to my grandfather. I remember exactly who saved me. I have never forgotten the despair of that night, the cold that sank into my bones, the way my teeth chattered, the way I thought I might die on a park bench, not even for a single day. It is simply impossible to forget. Some things are burned into you. Keeping my glare fixed on all of them, I revealed the truth I had replayed in my heart countless times since that night. The truth I had whispered to myself in the dark when I couldn't afford to turn on the heat. I ran to Paige's house. She took me in. She took care of me for 2 weeks while I found an apartment. Her parents also remember exactly how I showed up sobbing in the middle of winter with nothing but the clothes on my back. They were furious. Her father wanted to call the police. He said, "How could any parent throw out their daughter in the middle of the night? In December? This is criminal." I pulled out my phone, my hands steady now. "If you want, I can call Paige right now and put her on speaker. She can testify very clearly whether I ran away for fun that night or whether I was thrown out like garbage. She's been waiting 5 years for me to make this call." My mother's face stiffened. Her theatrical tears stopped instantly, as if someone had turned off a faucet. Her mouth hung open. I continued, my voice growing stronger with every word. The years of silence were breaking apart inside me. Most of my paycheck disappeared instantly. Every month. Rent. Living expenses. Treatment for my chronic illness. Medication. Doctor's copays. I didn't have a single cent left for anything else. Not a coffee, not a movie ticket, not a birthday present for myself. Whenever I was truly desperate for money, when I had to choose between food and my prescription, I worked the overnight shift at a 24-hour diner after my day job. I sacrificed my sleep, my health, my sanity, just to survive. Speaking the words alone brought the memories flooding back like a tidal wave. The lingering smell of old grease stuck to the diner's kitchen tiles, impossible to wash off. The heaviness in my limbs at 4 in the morning, when my body screamed for rest, but my bank account screamed louder. The humiliation of counting a handful of coins in tips from drunk customers who looked through me as if I were invisible. The way my feet blistered after 12-hour shifts. The way I sometimes cried in the walk-in refrigerator just to have a moment alone. And while I was working myself to the bone like that, while I was scrubbing grills at 3 a.m. so I could afford my inhaler, so I could afford to see a doctor, what were you doing? I gestured wildly around the room, my arms sweeping across the marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the expensive art on the walls. I was shocked to see this house again today. The kitchen is remodeled. Top to bottom. There's a brand new commercial-grade refrigerator that probably cost $8,000. Outside, a shiny new SUV in the driveway. When I begged you for help 2 years ago because I couldn't make rent, when I called you crying, humiliated, throwing away every last shred of my pride, you ignored me. You said you had no money. You told me to handle my own problems and hung up on me. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. So, where exactly did you get the money for all this luxury? For the marble? For the car? For the trip to Hawaii? Answer me. My parents exchanged panicked, wild glances. They muttered helplessly, their mouths moving but producing no coherent sounds. That's not what happened. They moved their lips as if searching desperately for an excuse, a lie, anything, but the words got stuck in their throats. Nothing meaningful came out. Their faces were the color of old cheese. Then I turned my gaze to Madison, who had shrunk back into her chair. And that's not all. Last summer, The three of you took a first-class trip to Hawaii to celebrate Madison's high school graduation, didn't you? I saw it on your Instagram, Madison. You posted 47 pictures. You were laughing on the beach at sunset. You were snorkeling. You were drinking cocktails with little umbrellas in them. You looked like you were having the best time of your life while I was working double shifts at a diner, coming home so exhausted I couldn't even shower before I collapsed. At this direct accusation, Madison's face flushed bright red, a deep, guilty crimson. She tried to make another excuse, her voice shrill and defensive, but under my grandfather's icy, unblinking stare, she swallowed her words. She only looked down in shame and embarrassment, her face buried in her hands. She too was an accomplice in this deception. She had known. She had benefited. And she had said nothing. My grandfather had watched the entire ugly argument with a cold, unblinking, calculating gaze. He hadn't moved a single muscle. He hadn't blinked. He looked like a statue of judgment. Finally, he raised one hand, palm out. That's enough. His quiet command took immediate control of the room. Everyone fell silent. The only sound was the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. My grandfather pulled his smartphone from his suit pocket and began making a call. Everyone in the room held their breath, frozen in place. "It's me," he said into the phone, his voice calm and businesslike. "Sorry to bother you on Thanksgiving, Margaret. I need something urgently." He paused, listening. "Yes, I'll wait. Please send the full transaction history of the transfers I made every month from my personal account to Karen's account, from 5 years ago until today, as a PDF to my email immediately. Not a summary. The full history. I want to confirm it here and now, line by line." His voice was quiet, but carried an undeniable, absolute authority that allowed no refusal. This was the voice that had closed billion-dollar deals. My father shouted in panic, his voice cracking. "Wait. Dad, what are you doing? You can't just. This is a family matter. We can talk about this privately." But my grandfather only shot him a cold, dismissive look, the kind of look you give a stranger who has interrupted a private conversation. He did not respond. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock and the rapid beating of my own heart. Tick, tock, tick, tock. After what felt like an eternity, perhaps 3 full minutes, though it felt like 3 hours, my grandfather's phone vibrated softly with an email notification. The sound was tiny, but in the silence, it was deafening. He put on his reading glasses, opened the email, and began slowly scrolling through the attached file. His finger traced down the screen, line by line. His expression did not change. Then he slowly lifted his face and spoke, each word sharp as a blade, precisely aimed. "Transfer date? The 3rd of every month. Recipient? Karen Brooks. Your personal account. Account number ending in 8842. Amount? $1,500. And in the memo section, it clearly says this, every single time, Amanda's monthly support." He paused, then held the phone out across the table toward my parents as though presenting irrefutable evidence in a courtroom. 60 transfers. 60 months. 5 years without missing a single month. My goodwill reached you faithfully, untouched, uncorrupted. His voice hardened into steel. But Amanda knew nothing. She never received this money. Not once in 5 years. Not a single dollar. He set the phone down on the table with a deliberate click. "So, explain it to me, Jonathan and Karen. Where did my $90,000 disappear to? Where is it?" The total, $90,000, a specific and crushing figure, pressed heavily onto the atmosphere of the living room like a physical weight. It was no longer an amount that could be explained away with excuses or tears or gaslighting. My father's face twisted as if he had been punched in the gut, all the air driven out of him. My mother finally broke down, but not into theatrical sobs, into genuine, choking, guilty, ugly weeping. Their faces were flushed red with shame and fear. No excuse. No lie. No manipulation. No performance could stand up against this immovable, digital evidence. An unbearable silence dominated the room. My father finally forced out a voice, but it was neither an excuse nor a justification. It was just one unbearably weak, pathetic word. I'm sorry. That single word was the moment he admitted his guilt. It was the smallest sound in the world, and it meant everything. When my grandfather heard it, he shook his head once in deep, profound disappointment. He quietly rose from his seat, the leather of his chair sighing as he stood. He no longer spared my parents a single glance. They had become invisible to him. Instead, he gently placed his hand on my shoulder, warm, solid, steady. Let's go, Amanda. There's no reason to stay here any longer. Not now. Not ever again. I nodded wordlessly and stood up, leaving my stunned parents and sister behind. Frozen at the table with their forks in their hands, and their lives crumbling around them like a house of cards, we turned our backs. We walked out the front door together into the cold November air. The door closed behind us with a soft, final click. Thus, the Thanksgiving dinner came to an end. And something new began. The following weekend, my grandfather called for me, and I visited his home, a comfortable, unpretentious house that smelled of old books and wood polish. Seated deep in the leather sofa of his study, a room lined with first editions and family photographs, Grandpa let out a long, heavy sigh the moment he saw my face. I'm sorry, Amanda, he said. I should have uncovered the truth much earlier. I should have asked you directly. This is my failure. My responsibility. His voice was thick with self-reproach. To be honest, it never occurred to me to doubt them at all. They were your parents. I wanted to believe the best. But when Tyler came to visit about a month ago and started talking about them, I began to sense something was wrong. Tyler was my mother's younger brother, my uncle, a quiet man who had always been kind to me. Grandpa continued, staring into the fireplace. Tyler told me they were invited to dinner here. He said he felt like he was stepping into a movie star's mansion. Apparently, your mother held a show-off party, celebrating the kitchen remodel. She invited everyone she knew. Tyler was puzzled. He said to me, Arthur, the flooring is imported Italian marble. The refrigerator is top-of-the-line commercial grade. I know Jonathan's company is doing only moderately well. So, where did all that money come from? Don't tell me you've been secretly helping them. Grandpa exhaled deeply, his face heavy with regret. The moment I heard Tyler's words, a terrible suspicion flashed through my mind. I was giving help. Yes, but that help was meant for you, Amanda. What if the money wasn't going to you at all? What if it was going straight into their pockets? Tyler's description of their extravagant lifestyle would suddenly make perfect sense. He looked at me with genuine pain in his eyes. That was the first time I realized the frightening possibility. I should have confirmed things with you much sooner. I thought I was helping you, but instead... I quietly shook my head, reaching out to take his hand. It's not something you need to apologize for, Grandpa. You were lied to. We both were. If you hadn't spoken up at that dinner, I might have lived my whole life without ever knowing the truth. I'm grateful to you. I will always be grateful. And then, for the first time, I confessed something I had kept buried in my heart for years. Ever since the day I was thrown out of that house, I fought with everything I had. Every single day. When I realized I couldn't rely on my family, when I understood that they would never help me, I decided I had no choice but to become strong. Strong enough to wear armor made of iron. I worked day and night. I studied business books during my breaks at the diner, wiping grease off my hands to turn the pages. And 3 years ago, I started my own small consulting firm. Just me and a laptop. Grandpa's eyes widened in astonishment. He leaned forward. At first, all I had were tiny jobs. Helping local shops with their books, organizing schedules for busy moms, formatting resumes for college students. There were so many times I thought I would break. So many nights I cried myself to sleep. But I never gave up. Never. Now things are finally moving in the right direction. My client list is growing. I have a waiting list. I'm financially stable enough that I don't need anyone's help anymore. Not theirs. Not anyone's. I looked out the window at the clear autumn sky. Of course, I lost a lot along the way. Sleep. Peace of mind. The illusion that family meant safety. But because of that hardship, I became truly independent. I gained a strength that belongs only to me. Something no one can ever take away. Something they can't steal. When Grandpa finished listening to my words, he nodded deeply, slowly. His expression filled with both relief and immense pride. I see. You've grown into a fine woman, Amanda. A remarkable woman. You truly have worked hard all on your own, with no help from anyone. His eyes glistened with faint tears. But then his expression shifted into something far more severe, more determined. But that doesn't mean Jonathan and Karen's crimes can simply disappear. While you were struggling, they were spending your money on marble floors and Hawaiian vacations and German cars. This has gone far beyond the bounds of something that can be forgiven as a family matter. This is a crime. He sat up straighter, his jaw set. I intend to take formal legal action against them. This is embezzlement. Fraud. Theft. They need to understand the weight of what they've done under the full force of the law. However, this will also pull you into the fight. It will be public. It will be ugly. I cannot proceed without your consent. Amanda, tell me what you want. Tell me the truth. At his words, I nodded quietly, without hesitation. I feel the same way, Grandpa. They need to face what they've done. They need to look at it without turning away. For the first time in 5 years, I want justice. Grandpa gave a heavy, solemn nod. Very well. Then we act at once. There is no need to show them mercy. They showed you none. And we did. The trial was brief, but damning, a matter of weeks, not months. The evidence was overwhelming. The court ordered my parents to repay the full $90,000 plus 5 years of interest. They sold the house, the car, the furniture, the jewelry. Everything. Today, they live in a small, cramped apartment across town. My father lost his job when word spread. My mother rarely leaves the house. Madison works as a cashier at a supermarket. As for me, I invested the returned money into my consulting firm. Last month, I hired my first employee. Next month, I'm leasing an office. And every Sunday afternoon, regardless of weather, I have tea with my grandfather on his terrace. We don't talk about the past anymore. We don't need to. We only talk about the future and how bright it finally is.